I've talked about this a few times because I think it's very interesting how badly the PlayStation brand is doing over in Japan. So we're going to talk about the launch of the PlayStation 5 over there and a little bit of the history of Sony in Japan and why this research firm, as compiled by PlayStation Lifestyle, is saying they are deeply concerned about the brand over there. I really don't think Sony cares. I think they've all but given up on Japan, to be honest. I think PlayStation games just don't really sell that well over there. I think that the money is in the global market. Japan's kind of become this strange niche area, to be completely honest. They really only seem to care about Switch games and I would say maybe some computer games. Consoles just don't do well over there anymore. I think they're really into mobile gaming. I think cell phone stuff. I know the Vita was very popular there. Switch is very popular there. Like, that's what kept Vita alive, from what I've read, is Japan. Because they love mobile gaming. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they work long hours. Many of them have long route, like they'll take subways back and forth to work so they can spend most of their gaming time like on the move, which would kind of make sense, right? But anyway, I just think this is interesting because PlayStation is a Japanese company and they've kind of shifted into becoming an American company. Because if you don't know, like I pointed out before, Sony Entertainment moved their headquarters from Japan to America. They've also become very Puritan. They go out of their way to censor anime girls. I've done a few videos on that. But it's a hypocritical stance because they're okay with stuff like The Last of Us Part 2, where, you know, Abby and that one dude can get it on pretty raw dog. That's okay. They'll leave that in there fully unedited. But God forbid an anime girl have too big of thighs or an overly large chest, then they kind of go out of their way to censor that. It's very strange and it's very hypocritical, but it's a fact. So I want to take a look at this because this is really interesting stuff here. They did a really good job and they point out some stuff. So the biggest thing here is that, you know, they point out this. So Famitsu sales data published on GameIndustry.biz Japan, translated on Reset Era, shows that the PS5 only sold 240,000 units in its first 6 weeks. The worst launch performance of any PlayStation console in the region. Besides the PSP, USADA says the sales figures show a pattern of disregard for the Japanese market. Quantitative analysis shows that Sony is not taking Japan seriously. A sales chart shows comparative numbers of similar sales periods for other consoles with projections for the PS5 saying its lifetime sales in Japan could end up at less than half of the PS4 if trends continue. Now, I know what a lot of people in the comments are going to try to say, and that's that, well, they didn't have that many units in Japan at launch. They didn't have that many. They only had 240,000. You're right. They only had 240,000. The point that they're making here in this article is that they're not taking Japan seriously. Take that 240,000 and compare that to what North America got, to what people in Europe got, right? They got a lot more. They didn't bother to send Japan very many sales or very many units because they didn't want them sitting on shelves. They'd rather them go to countries where people are going to buy them. There's a couple of things here going on. I think the censorship, I think them moving games more towards a Western audience is definitely an effect here. And, you know, it's just the trends of the culture in Japan when it comes to gaming. Like there's a lot of factors here to consider. It's not purely just the decline in anime games and, you know, lewd anime girls in games. They're clearly shifting any focus away from Japan. And it's unfortunate for the people that do game over there because they're missing out and they're not really being catered to. And a lot of them are going Nintendo, but you're not really getting that big AAA experience. You know, you can put Doom Eternal on the Switch and it'll run But when you compare it to like how it looks on the consoles, like PS4 and Xbox One X, it's a big difference. So they say, while sales numbers can be allocated to limited launch inventory with an expected surge once Sony gets manufacturing and supply worked out, there are still a number of factors over the last decade that USADA is taking into account in his analysis of the brand's decline in Japan. He specifically outlined the following. 1. The PlayStation 4 launched in 2013, but Japan's release came afterward. That's true. They released it in Japan after they launched it in North America, which is crazy when you think about it. That's not how it used to be. After fall of 2018, Sony implemented its own regulations on depictions in games, which has censored content aimed at Japanese users. That's 100% true. And like I said, it is a factor, but there's other things to look at with this too. It's not totally anime girl games, but it is a factor among many. So you've got a lot of stuff going on here. The PlayStation 5 reveal video had no Japanese narration. I didn't know that. Well, there were issues with the font used for the subtitles as well as their Japanese translations. That's interesting that I didn't even know. They didn't even bother to make a Japanese narrator for like have a narration in Japanese. Now, do that in contrast with like Nintendo. Even the stuff that they release over here, like they have a lot of Japanese. They don't even bother to dub over like the stuff that comes out of Japan. And they do cater to the Japanese market. I'm sure their directs are all in Japanese. When you look at like PlayStation and they don't even do that, I didn't know that. I'm learning that just with you guys for the first time. That's insane. And then here's another one. The confirm button was changed from O to X in order to set a global standard. Now that's another thing in contrast with Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't even change that for us. Like if you play a game on Nintendo, like the O is the confirmation button. Like that setup, they don't change it. Whereas always, like when a game comes out over here with the other companies, they change that for us. Nintendo doesn't do that. They don't even do that at all. Okay, which is kind of interesting. It's always funny if you play a Switch game for a while. I don't know, and I'm sure there's a lot of Switch gamers in this audience. Have you ever noticed if you play, like I played the Super Mario All-Stars, the 3D All-Stars that we got. So I played a lot of Switch. I beat all three of them in a row, and then I went back to, I think I don't remember what it was, but I went and played something on Xbox. And then, I was pressing the wrong, I got mixed up because I was so used to the schematic. This caused a lot of outrage in Japan. I don't know if I did a video on that or not, but they were pretty pissed when Sony made that O to X, switch, because they switched it for the people in Japan. They didn't like that. Okay, because for one, they consider that, you're catering to the foreigners over us, which they don't like. Due to manufacturing issues, the initial launch allocation for PS5 in Japan was barely above that of the PS3, preventing the system from reaching early adopters. Yosada also contributed a Bloomberg report last year that talked about Japan being sidelined by PlayStation, not only in focusing promotional marketing on the U.S. territory, but also in cuts happening to the Japanese development teams the publisher has under its umbrella. Notable departures from Sony's Japanese arms have been occurring with more frequency lately. In response to the Bloomberg report, PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan claimed the allegations were false and that Japan remains important to the PlayStation brand as its home territory. But Yosada says the actions of the company in the region don't match their words. And that's 100% true. Of course they're going to come out and say that. I mean, what are they going to come out and say? Oh, we don't give a shit about Japan. Like, that's not what they're going to do. They're not going to do that. They're going to, of course, say, of course, Sony loves Japan. But the facts are there, and they don't care anymore. And it's really interesting to me just because of, it's a Japanese company ditching Japan. And I can't really think of something that's happened like this in video gaming and, growing up in video games. You always had to take, it's more of like a symbolic thing to me. Because it's like growing up, you'd always hear about a game coming out in Japan, right? You'd have to look at Japanese screen caps and videos and get excited for it as you waited for the translation. And to see it switch like this, it's crazy. It's just crazy to me. And I think some people do find this interesting as well, maybe for the same reasons. I also think it sucks because it sucks for this reason. Because we get a lot of really cool niche games that come out of Japan. There's a lot of creativity that comes out of Japan that we just can't do over here because of all the Puritans and the SJWs and stuff. And games are starting to get made with censorship in mind during development. Whereas over there, story and gameplay comes first, if you get what I'm saying. So a lot of that is being forgotten over here, and I think eventually it's going to hurt. It is going to hurt games as a whole. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's my opinion. They also talk about how Sony relocated its headquarters from Japan to the U.S. back in 2016, a major move that caused Japanese gamers to become rather cold towards the publisher, saying that it was losing its core Japanese principles, despite Sony touting that the PS5 is the biggest PlayStation launch in history. Yasuda thinks the company will come to regret ignoring the Japanese market. Japanese users aren't likely to channel their dissatisfaction on social media to U.S. Sony Entertainment headquarters staff might perceive that as Japanese just politely accepting whatever is given to them, regardless of how cold they have actually become. Yasuda said, however, that couldn't be further from the truth. They simply begun to vanish into the sunset quietly. It's interesting stuff. Whether or not it turns out to be a thing, I don't know. We'll find out. I do think the writing's on the wall for them in Japan. I think Nintendo is in the best position here. Think about Nintendo. They don't dump a bunch of money into the hardware, right? They're not like interested in being the top dog when it comes to tech. They focus more on good games. They don't censor Japan. I think out of all of the companies, I think that they are going to end up having the last laugh. And it's because of the way they've been handling it. It's crazy that Nintendo is the most uncensored platform when you compare them to Sony and Xbox. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch this generation. This is going to be a very interesting console war this generation. And I think the next one, and there will be a next one, despite what people say, the next one's going to be really, really interesting. We'll see how it all works out. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on all of this. I'd like to hear from you. Also, if you'll please like, subscribe, share the video. Make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that notification bell. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. Also, if you want to help support the channel, check out my Teespring store. There's a link in the description. You can find some merchandise in there that you might want to check out.